Therapy Geeks, a free podcast by Luke McGibbon and Louise Taylor. That was a nice little
What's
test.
your mug got on it?
It says stressed out, which sounds very telling, but it's not my mug, so in that sense, less descriptive of me. I think I'm feeling very zen these days. All this time in the house.
You're not it.
Yeah, it's having a good effect on me, like a pig in
This
shite.
is your time.
Yeah, it is. We're talking this week about how different ways of practicing in therapy, but also in other aspects of life. And obviously, we're talking about this because for many people, their hand has been forced because of the global pandemic. Everyone's having to sort of practice in a different way now. So yeah, I mean, what about you, Louise? Anything in particular that's changed about the way that you're working with people?
Well, it's I think it's a really exciting time in some ways, but it's also quite nerve-wracking, especially if you've never done telephone counseling, Skype counseling, Zoom counseling before, and you've a lot of experience face-to-face counseling, and then all of a sudden to be thrown into this whole new way of practicing. It's nerve-wracking, probably really nerve-wracking for a lot of therapists.
Yeah,
because clients might notice too much of a difference. I know that might sound arrogant.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I don't think they realize how much of what is happening is physical. All that they always say, isn't it? 90% of communication is nonverbal or
Yes.
whatever. It's one of those things. But yeah, it's a lot harder to. I'm not necessarily looking somebody in the eye in the same way, and they might not even be looking at me. So their attention. I mean, if they're using Zoom, you could very easily just have Google Chrome open in another window, be reading an article somewhere. It's your attention could be divided a lot more. Yeah. I personally have had to move to phone counseling with my clients, which I have. It's been 3 weeks, isn't it? I've not fully adjusted, I think, yet. I do feel there is a less depth in the relationship, and I don't know if that's them or necessarily if it's me. I mean, I spoke to one of my clients and they were going for a walk, which was that's really nice actually, but I also couldn't hear them very much because they were on the main road, and there was traffic. And I imagine it probably affects what they're going to be saying as well. If you're walking past people, you're not going to be talking about erectile dysfunction or whatever it is. And because you're very much in the public. So I do think it affects what people say.
Yes.
I've not done any online counseling yet, but I've heard that a lot of people are resorting to things like Zoom. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like it's a lot easier to divide my attention, but
I think it's like everything. It's got its pluses and minuses.
Well, yeah, definitely, and I suppose as well it depends on your modality too, because say you're a CBT therapist, which can, not always, but can involve a lot of paper and homework assignments and things like that. Yeah, it's very hard to give that over the phone, and it's probably not that easy to do over the internet too. I had to I wouldn't normally give CBT homeworks, but I do give some homeworks to clients, journal prompts and things like that. And I've had to start emailing stuff out to them, but I can't use my personal email, obviously. So I had to go to mail.com and make a new email address. And obviously I can't tell people what it is, but it's such and such at counselor.com, which sounds really made up. You know what I mean? It sounds like I got my degree in the bag of a cereal box or something, But I said,
do you know what else? I love the fact that you brought up the different modalities and the different disciplines, because I have never been so grateful to be trained in the integrated approach than I have recently.
Yeah.
Because when I'm explaining, like, recently I had to do, like, I do telephone consultations, and they're all, the initial telephone consultations, completely free of charge, deciding whether or not they think they want to be, you know, supported by me. And when I was describing that, often people will tell me about past therapeutic experiences and past counselors. One of the things, I'd be like, well, I'm a talker, right? But one of the things they'll say, and possibly why they'll want to work with me, is because they didn't get a lot back from the other counselors. They didn't get a lot of, flow
new things
of input from the counselor. Yeah.
Like that's
whereas I think with this, what?
Sorry, no, I guess you're describing like a counselor who's maybe too reflective, so it just ends up being, let's tell the story, and then let's tell the story, and let's tell the story.
Yes. Person-centered.
Yeah, well, I do think person-centered does give new information though as well. Like if you're doing good reflection, it's like it is information that is new to clients, I think. But it's just it's like a grain of new information, just a bit at a time, you know.
Yes.
But sorry, you were saying something there.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, so that kind of sitting and allowing the space and allowing the flow face to face in that kind of modality, person-centered, say, is a lot easier done in person than on the phone.
Oh God, yeah.
Because phone is more rhythmic, you know.
Yes.
Back and forth, like a tennis match more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Whereas person-centered is kind of like, you can't really do that much on the phone.
Well, I guess that is kind of what we're saying, aren't we? That like it is harder to have that relational depth, I think, without the entirety of a person being in front of you. It's harder to connect to your voice than it is to somebody who's there. And that kind of demands your attention. I used to do phone counselling in Childline there for like a year when I was 18, and what I noticed about it was, like, obviously the length is different, because I think people find a phone call weirdly intense. This is why you find a lot of people resorting now to texting as opposed to phone calls. But like, yeah, it's very, and you know, so people can't stay on the phone as long. Like they just want to be off. So like the sessions were always a lot shorter, which meant that when I was in Childline, you would be seeing a lot amount more clients. Like you'd be seeing like tens of people, you know, maybe hundreds, like depending on the time of day you were working and things like that. And I think that can probably, I mean, I did my dissertation on it, but my dissertation was on like burnout and compassion fatigue, and we found that phone counselors were more likely to experience like compassion fatigue, which is just, you know, sort of not being able to bring up that energy of giving a damn for people. Their telephone counselors are much more liable to experience that, and face-to-face counselors are much more liable to experience like burnout, which is just being done with a job entirely. And I suppose that speaks to a different kind of intensity to each kind of contact.
Well, I would have said I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I work private practice as a counsellor, and then I'm doing my research. Yeah. So not really, I don't think I would be able to work full time as a counsellor. I couldn't. I would burn out, undoubtedly. I think, you know, because how many clients are these full-time counsellors in these organisations seeing a week?
Yeah. I think there's like limits on it. It's definitely, it's interesting because I definitely should look this up before we start talking about it today. But yeah, like I'm pretty sure the BACP does have like an official rule, don't they? Like there is like a limit to the amount of clients that you can see in a week. Otherwise, because there's only so much of a person to give. But I think it's like, is it something like 20 clients a week? Is that too much? Is that crazy? That's like 5 a day.
That sounds like about right. Yeah. But they also, for full-time counsellors, they're in a difficult position because if they get a really secure job, right, in counselling, they're expected to do the high numbers, and their hourly rate is much lower.
Their hourly rate?
The hourly rate for private practice as opposed to counselling in those organisations is much lower.
I suppose as well, you've brought something up that I think is pretty relevant to what we're talking about today, which is like cost. So like, let me see here. I spoke to some clients and I spoke to some therapists on the internet just about how things have changed for them recently. And what somebody said was, I'm uncomfortable paying. Well, this is an American client. They were saying I'm uncomfortable paying $120 an hour for this now that we've moved to phone counselling. And like, I guess I get that.
$120 an hour.
Yeah, I know. Must be crazy.
What services? What are they doing? Like,
I don't know. I'm pretty sure their therapist is speaking to them on like a gold-plated phone or something. I've printed out your CBT exercise.
The standard rate.
What? Sorry?
The what?
I said I've printed out your CBT exercise on Gossamer for you.
It's just like, so the standard rate for counselling is £40 an hour at the minute.
Yeah, roundabouts. Right. I mean, here private practice is. I mean, I've never seen anyone cheaper than £35. Like in Northern Ireland, Anyway, I don't know about the rest of the UK or down south, but yeah, in terms of private practice, it's about 35, 40 quid an hour. Like, so I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, £40.
I think there might be like a psychiatrist. So it's obviously there's no NHS.
Yeah.
Like, people pay £1 million to have like their teeth washed or whatever. I don't know. It's crazy. So but somebody
said $120 to go from face to face to telephone. Whereas I would argue that if the client is very happy with the work and they feel that connection strong, well, would they not want to sustain that therapeutic relationship? And then like if they value it, then they'll be fine just keeping that support going in whatever capacity works for them.
I guess
because there's no feedback like that I would be getting in terms of, well, I'm not paying that because this all changed.
I think that's a really good point, which is that like I think a client might value different things in therapy than the therapist. So like, because what you were saying there about the value of the therapeutic relationship, absolutely, but also, does a client think in those terms? Do most clients think about the relationship, or do some clients think about what they're getting out of counselling or what's changed? Or, I mean, obviously that's just going to be a forever issue. Like, people come to therapy for different reasons and they want different things out of it. But like, Mick Cooper did a lot of research on relational depth, and one of the disturbing things he found about it was a lot of the times when a counsellor feels like they've reached a place of real depth for the client does not feel the same way, or vice versa. Sometimes you'll do something with a client and think it is nothing. It's just like you offer them a cup of tea or something, and it rocks their world. Like what causes somebody to feel a connection is different as well. It's and it's can't really be quantified, which is a shame.
Well, I think that's why I love the integrated approach, and I love looking at the different disciplines and the different theories. So I believe in as much client autonomy as possible. So I'm maybe one of the worst people for marketing myself. Because I say, if you don't like it, don't come back. If you don't think it's any good, you don't have to use me.
You leave.
I'm like, honestly, if it's working for you, it's working. If it's not, you don't have to use me. So I'm not one of these people who say, 6 sessions and then you'll see results. I'm like, it's up to you.
I had to get I got some counselling from an EAP in my workplace a while ago, and it's because they're confined to 6 sessions. I think what the therapist was trying to do with me was build up confidence in the process, because obviously that's correlated with success. The client goes, this is going to be good, then it's going to be good. But to me, it felt like confidence was being pushed on me a little bit when somebody was saying 6 sessions are going to be really good for you. I think it's going to be really nice, And to me, that felt like don't tell me what to do. There was like there was a reluctance in me there was a lot of resistance in me to do well in therapy. But I
To
suppose
do well, like to do well, like how do you do well? What is that about?
well,
6 sessions will work for you. I think that's a really, because that's quite an arrogant thing to say. Do you not think?
yeah, so yeah. I suppose the way it was phrased, it was much more focused on me. So to me, that removes some of the arrogance. But I think it could be put in a way that is arrogant. You could say like a few sessions. Oh, look here, I'll have you feeling right as rain. You're looking brilliant. Like it's all in tone, I suppose. But yeah,
Yeah.
like here, well,
You're like it's kind of like it sounds like, I'm not saying you are the Donald Trump of counseling.
yeah.
It's like you have that just blindless belief in your ability.
We're all going to be winning. I'm winning and winning.
I'm the biggest counselor you will ever meet. If you do not work, if this does not work, it's because you don't believe, and I am the best counselor ever.
But that kind of works for people. I mean, it got him elected. I mean, like it's kind of that whole maxim of speaking something into being. It's a lot like affirmations, or almost, I guess, like a conversational hypnosis. Just just going, you're gonna really be relaxed.
Yes,
well for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it is like hypnosis. It's like, this is gonna work. This is gonna work. But I don't know. I suppose I believe the client knows what's best. The client is the expert.
Yeah.
And if I've got the tools and skills and knowledge that can support them, brilliant. If I haven't, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's well, that's like the Gestalt prayer, isn't it? If we should meet, that's excellent, and if we don't, never mind. Basically, the old Gestalt prayer. Here, we were talking about the. I'll bring it up, but we were talking about the online counselling there. And I think one of the things that popped into my head there was like connection issues. So we had that delay the last time we did the podcast, which I think it worked out all right. You were saying that it made it sound like you were laughing at things that were morbid, was it? I don't remember.
I was watching back going, oh no, I didn't find that funny. I find the thing you'd said 4 seconds before funny.
Sure, that's all right, isn't it? I mean, it just makes it sound like you've got a very dark sense of humor.
No, it just sounded like there was one time where you'd said about, it's maybe a bit bad that I can't remember being a child as a counselor. Maybe that's bad. And the delay had me going, yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah, that's pretty horrible.
That at all. Oh, terrible.
But imagine if you had that delay in something like a session with a client. Like what if they're saying something that is funny and then something horrible, and then it makes it look like you laughed at something horrible, or you say something along the lines of like, and that's that kind of reminds me of the person who abused me, and then there's a pause and the therapist says to them, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out. Like that's, imagine having to make somebody repeat something horrible.
Disclosure that they've never disclosed before.
Yeah, and then you have to disclose it twice. Ugh, that's a bit. It feels iffy. Like, so, I mean, obviously that's one of the issues with this. I suppose it's like, how do you get to that level of relational depth that you can make these mistakes with a client? Like, because in person, it's very easy to. I think it's very easy to communicate congruence and unconditional positive regard, but there was like a presentation I listened to on phone counseling, and I heard the one thing I took away from it was the lecturer saying that usually you can communicate things via body language. So like sometimes I can challenge a client what they're saying simply by tilting my head a bit, like it's like me questioning what they've said, but like you can't really do that over the phone. And what the lecturer suggested was just describing your body language, which to me feels unnatural, but I imagine there's probably something to that, just to say like, I'm nodding, or to say like, oh
Oh,
yeah, that makes me
no.
smile, or that makes me sad, or whatever. I don't know. But,
I can imagine, like, I've got my legs crossed now and I am stroking my chin.
yeah, I don't like that. Yeah, it feels too
I,
therapist-y.
yeah.
I quite like a therapist to be not matey, but not to look too much like they're doing something to me. It's about
That's
appearing curious rather than
congruent.
you're yeah, it's about appearing curious rather than appearing to be a mechanic in your brain. To me anyway, that's the kind
Yeah.
of therapist I like.
I think that's like, that's the other thing that came up in the session the other day. It's like security, confidentiality.
Right.
And I think a lot of this can be, a lot of these issues can be sorted by contracting.
Mm.
So for somebody like, what I'm thinking is a lot of the clients I've seen on these different platforms, the relationship started on those platforms.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So if a relationship has constantly been on top and it's developed as a telephone counselling,
Right, it's normal.
that'll be all that you know. That'll be so normal. Whereas if it was face to face and it's become telephone, that's when you're going to be a bit because you haven't contracted for telephone counselling.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because to me, so much of the purpose of contracting isn't just the sort of the legal back covering, so much as it is to go, this is what it's going to be like. This is what you can expect. So don't be weirded out when you're in a conversation with somebody who never talks about themselves. Or well, I mean, I talk about myself a bit in therapy, but it's yeah, and I guess like a contract is a good cushion for something like this to go. I'm going to be describing my body language or whatever.
No,
Whatever. I'm not going to be
imagine.
I see what they're getting at, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I know, but I think that would be if that was very important with the way. I think it's all about the way the relationship has continued. So, before I started telephone counseling people, I would have thought this is a per relative to the real deal. The ultimate is face to face.
Yes.
Right. That's what I would have believed until I had seen telephone counseling work very well for clients. Okay. Not all clients, but those particular clients. But they had come saying, "This is the service I want."
Yes.
This service, and then there was a lot of discussion about why they wouldn't go and use face to face and what it was, why. And then once that was all established, right? Okay, this could be a better service for them. Then it's progressed, and actually, a lot of the decisions and choices and everything are all in their hands. However, for people who've had a therapeutic relationship develop and the ball's been hit out, it's been changed. The game's been changed.
Yes.
It's a bit difficult. Well,
I said that is a good metaphor. Yeah, because in a way you've set up a series of rules to the way that you're going to be conversing before now, and then suddenly it's like it's different now, and that's jarring, I suppose, to say the least. For
you see your client who was out walking, and you said about like erectile dysfunction, out walking, who you feel. See, this is it. This is where kind of what do you do now? Because if you have your 4 o'clock on a Tuesday slot, and you're trying to adapt, and that's it's kind of like right. You need space where you're not going to be interrupted, because that was the whole point of having one-on-one sessions. That was something weird. We have private spaces, we have client rooms, and you're not to be interrupted. Like sometimes it happens, it's inevitable, accidents happen. However, with this whole new telephone counselling, if you try and make a space which is the same kind of levels of privacy, then you have a good chance of being able to get into that more relational depth, and that more they feel like they're not worrying because their mom's going to walk in, or the kids are over here and they're talking about their ex-partner or issues. So that's where it's creating a space where, okay, when will you have the time to actually designate 1 hour solely to the therapeutic relationship? Because And why would they try and get their exercise and the other things done in that hour that's supposed to be therapeutic?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess scheduling's changed as well, but I think what you're getting at is the idea of like the so many modalities, particularly psychodynamic, talk about the therapy room being a container of sorts.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So the way to adjust this to phone counselling is to find a place to be the new container, because well, the room is this sort of neutral area like that allows somebody to be more of them. And I guess somebody has to make that in their house, or somebody has to make that in their life, and maybe that is walking, I suppose, but it's not ideal in terms of privacy. But so I mean, to me, that's not a perfect container. But one of the things we were talking about before this was actually about how the time is also the container. Like, so we were talking about, and we'll get onto this more later, I suppose, but like a group therapy WhatsApp is described by a place. And you said, well, what about WhatsApp? And I think we both agreed, like, WhatsApp can be kind of invasive, particularly like a work WhatsApp or something like that. And to me, like, the imperfection in that is that it's not a set time. Like, a WhatsApp group therapy thing is kind of like a group therapy session that goes on all week because you can just speak in at any time. Like, to me, it would have to be closed for all but 1 or 2 hours a week, because the time is the container as much as a place is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I agree. If you are having a therapeutic WhatsApp group, then it has that, like, okay, if it's like from 7 to 9, that's when the therapy goes on.
Yeah.
Because then it just gets really messy. Like, I mean, the number of WhatsApp groups I've left, they do my head in. Yeah. They absolutely, WhatsApp is my least favorite mode of communication, possibly.
I feel like about 90% of the women I know are still a part of a hen party group chat a year and a half ago, and they've never quite left. And occasionally someone will post something in it and they'll all go, for fuck's sake, It's like the old Michael McIntyre bit about every man having a man drawer. I feel like every woman has an old hen party that's never quite stopped.
The amount of WhatsApp I see in my old counselling course. I hated it. The WhatsApp groups. I left those. Like, I was just like, nah, I'm done. Because what was happening too was there was the WhatsApp group which was supposed to be for whatever it was designated for, but then it would become, for want of a better word, polluted.
Yeah.
It would be muddied. And then it would kind of, and then it used to do my head in, because people would be like, there might be subgroups going on, and it just became not fit for purpose.
Very polite way of putting it, I think.
Then I left the group. Leave the group.
When I was studying, given the relative age range of most of the students, there wasn't really WhatsApp. I think there was like a Facebook group, and Facebook groups are a bit easier to shelve when you're not using them. You know what I mean? It was mostly just for a bit of crack, but yeah, I know what you mean though, because like sometimes whenever I'm off, sometimes I have to mute my work ones just because I just can't handle all the buzzing, from my phone, or it is kind of like a part of you is still in work the whole bloody time. But yeah, it is difficult. What do you?
Yeah.
Pardon me. What do you think of email counseling, or just, well, because we were talking about emailing like assignments and things to clients, or using it to schedule perhaps, but like some places do email counseling. As far as I'm aware, I know Childline does, for one thing, and I think Aware does. We're going to be talking about them a bit later, but to me, obviously the issues with phone and online counselling are still there, but I do think there are some benefits in that it's kind of rather than like a conversation, it's more like somebody says everything that they would say in a session all in one go, and you respond to it all in one go. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
So like instead of going like, sorry?
Would that be the way? I thought that might, because that's not something I have had like a clear. I was thinking you have an hour where you just communicate back and forth. Now I know that happens in some of the sites, the bigger websites.
Interesting.
Kind of, they have designated online counselors, and they're just
okay.
Yeah, because sometimes, where did I see? I think it was at the suicide prevention conference in Derry last year.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about this kind of counselling, and they were saying like about how for a lot of people that was much easier to disclose information like that.
I can understand that, definitely. I find that actually it's over the internet without a face or a voice, that people find it a lot easier to say no to things. It's a lot easier to cancel plans, and I think that that also applies to sessions. So like clients who I would normally just have miss a session or not turn up would email me just to cancel. And to be honest, so like there is some ways in which people can be more honest. Um, in my experience, whenever I was in Childline, I found that whenever people went for email counselling rather than going like the back and forth over an hour, which I like the idea of that a lot. There would be someone would send about 3 or 4 paragraphs, and normally if you were to see that person in face to face counselling, it would be you would get those 3 paragraphs piecemeal. You know, it would be, first of all, I want to talk about this, and you would talk about that, and then they would say, next of all, I want to talk about this. Whereas you get an email and it's like, I've got this issue, I've got this issue, I've got this issue, and then you respond, tell me about this, tell me about this, tell me about this, you know. And it's interesting because sometimes a session can move quite fast and you go, I want to talk about that, but something else comes up and you never get the chance to talk about it. Whereas in email, everything's there, you talk about everything, you know. And like I do think it has that strength. I
Yes.
obviously think it does lack a lot of the things that the other ones do as well, but it's a different kind of communication, and I guess, you know, different
Yes.
kinds of communication will always stimulate your brain in different ways, and that's always a good thing, you
I
know.
think that's a brilliant point though, because it keeps it more focused. Because like me,
Yeah.
I'm so easily distracted. Like, so I'm like, well, this happened, but I need to tell you everything else that happened in the last 5 years before I get to that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And like clients can sometimes get really frustrated about that because you spend a whole session talking about something, and the last 3 minutes they'll go, for fuck's sake, I wanted to talk about this.
Yes.
That's not an issue over email, I suppose, as well, you know. And people get to really
Yeah.
take their time and craft a response, and really open up as much or as little as they wish to. But
That's why I love writing.
yeah, writing's so good for you. It's healthy as fuck, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think that too, like if I'm like trying, so for instance, with my supervisors in uni, if I'm thinking, right, I've got a lot here that I want to, you know, I want to make sure when I'm asking them to go out of their way to support me with something, that I have the crux of it. And I'm not being scatterbrain Louise going, well, I just feel a bit stressed with this, that, and the other. So it makes me more focused, right? These are the issues. If I write it all down and I write the email, whereas if I was on the phone going, you know what I'm like, I'm just all over the place. They'll be like, yeah, but Louise, what's the issue? Like, how can we help? Well, you know what? I just don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
Whereas writing it down, I kind of just keep the points to the research.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That it's like a way of organizing your thoughts, basically.
Yes.
Like that's what writing is, and I suppose email manages to incorporate that into things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that's not a very level playing field for people in terms of therapy, because I'm educated and I find it very easy to write. And it doesn't take me long to write. I can write a hell of a lot very quickly. And it's kind of flowy.
Yeah.
Whereas for people with learning difficulties, for people who haven't got that level of education,
dyslexia,
some people find it incredibly difficult to express themselves in the written form for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Like, and you know, I mean, all you have to do is look at your Facebook timeline to see to see that thing, you know. Yeah, I guess you're saying that like you can't exactly prescribe writing to everyone in the world, because it does. I mean, even literacy is kind of a place of some privilege, you know. Like
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
there's a relatively high percentage of people in the world who are like illiterate or just like dyslexic for you know whatever one reason or another, and like that does get in the way of stuff like that. But if you can, it's good to have, you know.
Yeah,
It should be
absolutely.
What do you think of these different like methods of webcam stuff? Because you know we're using Zoom, obviously. I've had some meetings over Jitsi, which I think might be better actually than Zoom, but
Yeah, I haven't heard of Jitsi.
Jitsi's pretty good. It's JITSI. So with Zoom, you would need to have a paid account to speak for more than 40 minutes with more than three people. To me, I mean, that's a pretty good deal because we have infinite time. We can record as much as we want because we're just two. But let's say if you want to teach a class on the internet or something, you know, you might not want to pay for the paid account. Whereas I think Jitsi is always free, as far as I'm aware, and
Very
you can
good.
have as many people as you want on it. Like I think they've
What
had.
about Skype? I've done a session on Skype, and after our delay thing,
Aye.
I was like, oh, maybe Zoom's not great for the delay, but our delay is not too bad today. But Skype, there was no delay really.
Great. It's weird how Skype haven't really, like, as a company, leapt on this. Because, like, when you think about it, before the pandemic, had anyone in the world heard of House Party or Zoom or Jitsi? Like, if you wanted to do some sort of web chat, you would have gone for Skype. And it felt weird that, like,
I
within a few weeks of this, that they haven't completely capitalized on it and dominated the market. But they've just kind of been
Is
forgotten.
it security that they're maybe not known as the most secure?
Mm. I do think that's
but
becoming
it
a
was
thing now, isn't it?
but it was the client who picked Skype,
Mm.
and that was spoken about in the session: security
Mm.
and confidentiality with these. And it's an interesting one, actually. How do you guarantee confidentiality on
Yeah.
Zoom and Skype and all?
There is issues with encryption, don't they say? Like every one of these programs always says, I'm just looking at the top of this chat now, it says your client connection is encrypted. But I think I'm not really an expert, but I believe there's like different levels of encryption. And I think Zoom, there was some scandal recently about encryption here. But the problem is that like House Party is another one that people are using, and House Party recently tweeted saying that like false rumors have been spread about how bad their encryption is, and they offered a reward, like a bounty, to whoever had spread the information to catch them. So it seems to me that like now that these three services are in high demand, they've immediately become incredibly hostile to each other, and it's impossible to know what's true and what's not in terms of encryption and protection of data. So like it is actually kind of hard to guarantee total confidentiality with somebody over this at the minute.
No, but this is it. But then I would also be like, when I was talking about it with the client, I was saying, well, this is, if confidentiality is breached, if you don't feel safe, this is what you want. If you don't feel safe, it's your confidentiality that's going to be breached. It's going to. So this is why it's so important for them to choose, I think, which they feel most comfortable with. Like, I mean, what are people concerned of? Are they concerned about people recording these and then what, selling them on?
I know, like what's the
Hear
market?
what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, that's what I find about, people on social media too. You know what I mean? Like, people who share loads of pictures of dogs, or like, I don't know, they don't share anything really particularly controversial, but they're obsessed with their privacy.
Yeah.
And people not getting this information that they're sharing. I'm like, what? Why is MI5 after your freaking dog memes?
Yeah. Hey, you don't know what they're keeping in the vaults like.
Ignoring, love you, but I don't think you're a threat to national security.
Oh man. These there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around about all this, aren't there? I think that's really dodgy. I think I think you could do a whole one on that alone. I think, but to me, there's some really scary shit that people are saying. Scary because it's untrue is what I mean, rather than scary because it is. But yeah.
Scary because a lot of people are on the verge.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think you'd listen to anything at the moment. Whenever this pandemic started and the lockdown happened, I thought, God, it must be a terrible time to suffer from delusions or schizophrenia because like there's this worldwide event and people are in danger. And I thought, like, I can't imagine what they're going through. It must be horrible. Like, how much of this do you think is true?
Yeah.
Who would they think is behind it? And some of them might think they're responsible in some shape or form, like
Oh, yes.
they could be.
Paranoid schizophrenia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I created this.
Yeah,
This is all like, I knew this would happen. Like, how many, this is the apocalypse.
yeah, yeah.
I
There's
know people who've been watching apocalyptic films, they must be shitting themselves.
oh man, but I feel like the apocalyptic feeling has sort of faded from the first few weeks. Like the first few weeks, it really did. There was an end of the world feel, wasn't there? Whereas now it feels like a bit of a shite holiday, really, doesn't it? The, it's the queue to get to the shops. The sun is out,
I
but
don't
you
know.
can't go that far outside. You have to sit in your alleyway in a deck chair. It's kind of it's fine.
It's kind of, well, that's it. I don't know. It's a difficult one because there's a big change. People. I have to really, really not engage with a lot of stuff that's going on Facebook. Like it does. It's kind of like worrying in a way. You're just kind of like, I feel like saying to people, just be careful what you put in your head.
Yeah,
Just be
absolutely.
careful what you fill your head with.
Yeah,
You can choose what you're going to put in there and just be cautious because it has a big effect. But you see the whole idea of the apocalypse, like the Hollywood idea of the apocalypse, the end of the earth, is like, it's just dystopia, isn't it?
yeah.
It's this whole dystopian world where people can't breathe, and actually in a lot of those films they have supermarket scenes,
They do,
like
yeah.
where people are like
Looting
fancy.
almost,
They
yeah.
have the army.
Aye.
The army is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Martial, like, kind of constraints. So a lot of those films, like, and I don't like those films. Like I would be more into like documentaries, comedies, and just a bit of, nonsense, but not like that kind of nonsense. But if you're into that, I'm seeing things unfold. And a lot of these films are also about killer viruses.
Yeah. Like all these zombie films as well, or well, one of the big popular ones at the moment is Contagion, which came out in 2011, and it's gained a certain amount of traction because it was very, very realistic. Obviously, I think the virus in that film is a lot more dangerous, but because I think it's 100% mortality rate, which is obviously different to COVID. But yeah, like there was talk about social distancing in that film, and like the all the characters were in the WHO and all the various things that have been happening now. I mean, it's for people who think that it's new. It's really good to see that like it's new vocabulary entering the public consciousness. But
Yes.
For epidemiologists and people who've seen this all coming, it's been like the language has existed for a long time, and the plans have as well, and that's in many ways reassuring. I find. It's a good Netflix series called Pandemic, which is more documentary vibe on the nature of pandemics and the way that healthcare workers work in it and things like that. It's very good. But yeah.
But you see that what I was thinking, like, because those people who think of apocalypse on those terms are thinking in terms of imminent death. Whereas the word apocalypse can mean the end, but the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I was another academic who said this to me, and he was saying it's like lifting the veil.
Yeah.
Apocalypse can be the whole start of something new.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people who think in terms of apocalypse as a really, really disastrous thing, it's going to affect the way they think about this. Whereas for me, I think this is a time of change, and it can be an opportunity to start living differently, which is good.
Yeah, like in Norse mythology, like the apocalypse there was called Ragnarok, and what I remember about it is it's like the twilight of the gods. Like Thor gets ate by a snake or something. I can't remember. Everyone dies basically. But what I always remember is that at the end of it, everything starts again immediately. Like it's Ragnarok is succeeded by the beginning all over again. So I mean, I think that's quite symbolic of how. I don't mean everyone's gonna die and we're gonna start over again, and that's great. I mean more that like your life's gonna change, not end, most likely.
Yes, that's exactly the way I see it.
Yeah.
I see it as it's a huge change, and it's a time where it's a time for reflecting and for possibly getting rid of things that no longer serve you, practices, habits you've got into.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, whether that be spending habits, working habits, lots of habits that
or the
you
ways
no longer
practice as a therapist. They're filled with habits as well. So it is healthy to be trying these new things. I asked a lot of I sort of not a survey, but I asked around on Facebook for like various clients and counselors to tell me how things have changed for them. I have some quotes if you don't mind me blurting them out here. Somebody said to me, all my clients were offered the opportunity of continuing counselling via FaceTime or of delaying it until this is all over. Some took up the offer, some chose to put it on hold with just a quick checking in email each week. I work for an agency that offers a free counselling service. I guess it would have been slightly different had they been paying. Seems to be working. It's interesting. This to me, I like this bit. It's interesting to see the client in their home and see for myself what their family dynamic is like. My main concern is that confidentiality is very easily compromised, as there is a chance of people overhearing the session, as well as the possibility of digital recording. As an alternative, it works, but it's not ideal. I think that's a really interesting point, that you do get to see the client in their house, in their home, and maybe even how they are with other people. But like we were saying earlier, like confidentiality is pretty easily compromised. I had a client and a phone call about half an hour early, because they said, well, my family's waking up, there's nowhere I can go in this house where they can't hear me now, so gotta go. Like that's pretty intense.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And it's also, you're getting a glimpse into their home environment, into their world. I think something that you wouldn't get that into their space, because when they turn up at sessions, they're closed, and we are like, what is it, like human beings, they get a snapshot of people and they're naturally hardwired to try and make sense of that person by the information. That will change because we're to be blank slate, which is a load of nonsense, but that's what you have to aim for, just taking the person as they are.
Yeah.
But we're all people, so we've all got prejudices and judgments and stuff like that. And seeing into somebody's house for a therapist may realize, they may start learning a bit more about themselves, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's definitely different. It's difficult, I think, even to see yourself back in the camera. But I guess there's, like you're saying, there's benefits as well. Isn't there? Like this one's from a client. They said, I'm finding it generally easier to talk over video than in person because I can have my dog with me during sessions. I like that.
Oh.
I also feel like if anything happened to my therapist, I would have no way of knowing. Like, she's much less there now, so that kind of makes me anxious. I've been loving quarantine up until this past week, where a lot of internal shit has surfaced, partly triggered by transference too. I guess, in a way, the relationship with the therapist is less secure whenever you're not seeing them in person, particularly if they're like elder, like if there's somebody at risk of a fatality if they were to catch COVID. Like, it's an interesting test of your attachment to a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like
Yeah.
I like the idea of having your pet with you. I feel like most people who've had to have a staff meeting over Zoom at the minute know the experience of a cat joining them, or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my cat doesn't love me
Yeah.
enough to join us. My cat doesn't give a fuck. He tried
My
someday
cat,
to
no,
join
I'm well and truly close to that cat because Carla's been sitting in front.
Uh,
I can't pick her up. She does you can't pick that cat, so can't move her. So I'm like, nah, just keep you out there. But no, that's really nice though, the whole pet and being able to sit and stroke like your dog or sit with your dog while you're talking. There's for a lot of people, I think these sessions will be a lot easier. I was talking to somebody else, another one of my supervisors, like an endless list of supervisors, but he was saying about male clients and how they often find it easier. Face to face isn't always the best way. Like I should do a lot more research on this, but for men clients, shoulder to shoulder or other ways is often easier for them to talk openly than face to face.
that makes sense.
So yeah, so I think that might be really good in terms of on the phone or just being open to practicing counseling in different ways, because I know like walk and talk sessions, I know how effective they can be, but it was absolutely terrifying when I started doing them because that wasn't the traditional way.
It's that shoulder to shoulder you're talking about.
Shoulder to shoulder and using the space and just going slightly into the unknown, because you don't know who else is going to be using the space. You don't know when you're going to be coming across another person. And with wild therapy, which is Nick Totten, and with different ecotherapists, like I had read quite a lot of them, they were like, don't be intimidated by the interruptions, incorporate them into the session. And I was like, how the frig are you supposed to do that? Like, and they were talking more about like nature and all that there. But I was like, oh no, this is going to be awful. But actually, the more I've done them, the more I realized what they meant. So I just know there's lots of different ways of doing counseling and therapy. And the most important thing, I think, is contracting well and the client being in control.
Yeah, I think so. I think like at the end of the day, all you can really do is hand the locus of evaluation to a client and, put them in the steering wheel. And, like ideally they'll choose what they need. I have one more quote here, and then I think we can talk a little bit about some of the other services and what they're doing, and then I think that'll be us. But
how long have we been on?
We've been about 50 minutes so far.
Is it?
Roundabout.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have my first telehealth appointment with my psychiatrist tomorrow. It's super awkward in some ways, but actually better than her office in others. In her office, I'm very aware of how I look, how my clothes are positioned, what I'm wearing in general, and my body language. Of course, that is what makes video a little awkward too. She can't see my body language, so now I just have to tell her I'm anxious. But I can doodle easier. I'm in my pajamas and she can only see the top part of me. I can have whatever drink I want with me. If I wanted to smoke, I could. And it's more comfortable physically, but not necessarily emotionally. I like the idea of somebody who likes to smoking in session. Obviously, not a smoker myself, but like there's certain freedoms. I think if we're talking about dogs and cats being relaxing, why not other habits? I suppose. Obviously within reason. Yeah, I'm not saying turn up steaming or like scratching your
You
balls.
don't want somebody like drinking like cocktails, like.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's helps to get somebody to open up or feel relaxed, then I guess why
And
not?
what about like? Yeah, well, this is kind of like if it helps them to relax and open up, why not? Then there's like people use lots of different things to help them relax and open up.
I suppose so. It's like again, it's
you know what I mean?
it depends on the client, doesn't it? Like I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be keen on a client drinking to relax for a session if they had problems with alcoholism. You know what I mean? but but there's other
Yeah.
ways, I suppose. Um,
So I think that's contracting. I think that's boundaries. I think,
contract doping
I
camera.
got my tea. Like, how do you check? Like, I know it's peppermint with honey. I swear. But
I did.
I think it brings up lots of questions.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, it brings up lots and lots. And I think the best way to ever know if it's of being a benefit is the client.
Well, yeah, that's it. At the end of the day, like it's down to them, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've done a wee bit of research into other places to see what they're doing. I mean, and I don't necessarily just mean other therapy places, but them as well. But check with Aware Defeat Depression because I know they have support groups, and they're probably the only place in Belfast I've seen that have depression support groups. So sometimes I would refer clients onto them just as an extra support structure for their life. But they've been saying they're doing support meetings via Skype twice a week. But they also said they've been doing the online sessions in Skype for years for those who are, for whatever reason, unable to attend the face-to-face ones. So, like, they've been preparing for a very long time, and I admire that they have the online sessions for people unwilling to turn up to the face-to-face ones. I think that's a good
They're
idea.
ahead of the game.
What's that? Yeah, they are well ahead of the game, definitely. They've got a mail service, an online service, as well as WhatsApp groups, which we've discussed earlier. Um, there's an EMDR therapist who gave me a website where they can do EMDR with a client over the internet. It just basically has a dot moving left to right across the screen. I'm not so sure if I want to share the link because I feel like it's probably best used by people qualified, But if anyone wants to private message me after, then I'll be happy to give it to them. Gamblers Anonymous are using Zoom.
Gamblers Anonymous.
Yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous didn't respond to my email.
Gamblers Anonymous.
Yeah, they're just using Zoom at the minute. They haven't really said any more than that, which is, I mean, fair enough. There's probably not much more they can say. I spoke to a few churches, but not many of them really opened up to me. They were saying that they've been streaming their mass on the internet, but I like the idea of maybe a confessional over Skype if you're really to put your weight behind it. A bit of
That'll be
through him, with him, in him, all that stuff. There's a Zen monastery.
I don't know. I've never done confession.
You've never? Have you not? What the hell with you?
I've never ever. I've done it in plays. I played Once a Catholic. I was the nun actually in Once a Catholic in my drama training, and I learned a hell of a lot about the Catholic Church. But I've never gone to confession. I don't know what that's like.
No, I think it has some value. I'm not obviously religious myself, but I think it's probably one of the more important bits of having a religion is that I guess it's like we were saying earlier, that container, that space for somebody to talk about something that they might find reprehensible about themselves. There's a Buddhist group that normally meets in Belfast, and they've been having their meetings on Jitsi. So they would I think they read from a book every Saturday morning, and then they just talk about what the passage meant to them. I like the sound of that as well. But,
yeah, that's lovely.
so that's about all that I've managed to find. I guess I'm looking through the notes that I made before this, but one of the last things I wrote was try and savor this as much as you can. And I know that sounds dreadful, but also this is the only this after this is done, this isn't going to happen again in our lifetimes. The last time something like this happened was 100 years ago. The next one's probably another 100 years away, and this is going to be in history books. So, I guess savor isn't the right word, but I guess pay attention to it.
Yes, savor is a hard word. Pay attention. Honor.
Honor. Yeah, honor's a good word. I like that.
Kind of like acknowledge. Yeah, pay to acknowledge it's happening. And I also think it's very important to think, what do I have agency over, what do I have control over, and what do I don't, what I not. So you're loving, like you're just like, this is great, love it, this is my time. Like, no, this has not been a great week. It's okay. But I'm a bit fed up now this year. I'm not like on the cusp of thriving. I'm like not at the peak. This is Luke. I made it. I was warm.
It's that shit holiday vibe, isn't it?
What?
It's that shit holiday vibe again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, like I am not getting my research done because I'm just being really bad procrastinator. My children are getting really angsty at me. They're really fed up that they can't do, like, go and see places around the country. Can't go to the North Coast. I'm a bit fucking bored now. Like, I know that's what a spoiled brat I am, but that's what
No, the entire world feels like this. You know, it's definitely not just you. Like, people need freedom, you know, it's important. But tough shit.
Yeah. And then the judges.
Was there?
I think the judges, like, you know, peeking through curtains, like the judgy people, and not Clive and Persephone.
Yeah.
And the you know, the handwritten notes on people's cars.
I've heard of this stuff. Yeah. It's quarantine shaming, like, not a great thing. But
quarantine shaming.
I think we've just hit an hour there. Shall we? Oh no, it's an hour and 15. You know, we should probably wrap this one up.
Because it was, you know what? It's all right, isn't it?
It's all right.
An hour and 15. That's a bit of a walk.
All right. Well, we'll speak to you all soon. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Any feedback, much appreciated.
Yes, anything
it's completely changed.
It's completely what?
Do you know, before we finish, you know, when we started our wee group, I think it was the 14th of January 2018, we started Therapy Geeks, or the Therapy Geeks page on Facebook.
We are evolving.
I remember we used to do dreams and talk about dreams. And
yeah, dreams still good. I still interpret my dreams.
I'd love you to interpret mine. Also, we've talked about guests and having guests. We've never had a guest, but we've talked about it.
We will. Well, let's do it now. Now's the time. In quarantine to change, you know.
Yeah. So we'll end with the jingle.
Yeah, and then we jingle. You start off all.
Okay. Therapy. You didn't join in.
I did. It's just, I think the delay's back.